Hi there. Welcome to Dreamy Histories channel. Tonight, we're climbing into the rattling cockpit of a C-46 Commando in 1943, where your sweaty palms grip the yoke as you stare at the wall of Himalayan peaks ahead. Peaks that have already claimed 3 of your squadron mates this week. You're about to fly the Hump, the most lethal air route in military history, where the mountains themselves are deadlier than any enemy fighter. And honestly, you probably won't make it back for chow tonight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Drop it in the comments below. Now, close your eyes and listen. You feel the engines cough to life on this makeshift bamboo runway in Assam, India. The morning humidity already making your flight suit stick to your back like a second skin. The smell of aviation fuel mixes with jungle rot and something else. Fear, maybe, though nobody talks about that. Your crew chief, a kid from Ohio who looks about 16, gives you a thumbs up through the dirty windscreen, but his eyes tell a different story. He's loaded your bird with 4 tons of cargo, everything from ammunition to medical supplies, all desperately needed by Chiang Kai-shek's forces in Kunming, China. Between you and that destination lies 500 miles of the most hostile terrain on Earth. The control tower, really just a bamboo shack with a radio, crackles through your headset. Red leader, you're cleared for takeoff. Weather report shows moderate turbulence over the first ridge. Moderate turbulence. That's what they called it when Thompson's plane got flipped upside down last Tuesday, sending him cartwheeling into a mountainside. You push the throttles forward anyway, feeling the overloaded Commando lumber down the runway like a drunk elephant. The bamboo strips bend and creak under the weight. At the last possible second, just when you think you're going to plow into the jungle, the nose lifts and you're airborne, climbing into air that's already shimmering with heat. Within minutes, you're leaving the flat plains of Assam behind, and the foothills of the Himalayas rise up like a green wall. Your altimeter reads 5,000 feet, but the peaks ahead soar to over 20,000. Your unpressurized flying aircraft, maxes out around 24,000 feet on a good day, which leaves you threading the needle between jagged summits with maybe 2,000 feet to spare, if you're lucky. The first mountain pass looms ahead, and you can already feel the turbulence starting to shake your teeth loose. The bamboo control surfaces of your hastily modified transport plane groan in protest. This is just the beginning. Your co-pilot, a chain-smoking Texan named Murphy, who claims he can smell bad weather coming, starts calling out altitude readings as you climb. 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. The engine note changes, becoming strained and desperate as the air thins. You're burning fuel at an alarming rate just to maintain altitude, and you haven't even reached the first serious ridge yet. Through the scratched plexiglass, you can see the jungle canopy below, an endless sea of green that would swallow you whole if you had to bail out. Historians still argue whether more pilots died from the impact or from what happened after they survived the crash, between the Bengal tigers, the head-hunting Naga tribes, and the simple fact that no rescue party could reach you in that vertical wilderness. The stick shudders in your hands as you cross the first major ridge, and that's when you spot them, the aluminum grave markers scattered across the mountainside below, twisted metal glinting in the morning sun. Each wreck a story that ended badly. Some are fresh, maybe a week old. The jungle hasn't claimed them yet. Others are just rust-colored stains on the limestone cliffs. Murphy follows your gaze and lights another lucky strike with shaking fingers. That's Johnson's bird. he mutters, pointing to a tail section jutting from the canopy like a metallic tombstone. Went down Tuesday, still had the baseball glove I lent him. You're flying a route born of pure desperation, a supply line that exists only because the Japanese have slammed shut every other door to China. When they captured the Burma Road in 1942, they thought they'd strangled the Chinese war effort. Instead, some genius, and you use that term loosely, decided to fly supplies over the highest mountain range on Earth. The pilots call it the Hump, though that's like calling the Pacific Ocean a pond. Originally, they promised you'd be flying transport duty, nice and safe, far from combat. Nobody mentioned you'd be threading between 20,000-foot peaks in planes designed to haul cargo over Kansas wheat fields. The operation started with just a handful of converted DC-3s, civilian aircraft with military paint slapped on. Within months, it became the largest airlift operation in history. You're part of the Air Transport Command now, though the regular Air Force boys call you allergic to combat. They've never tried to land an overloaded C-46 on a mountainside runway in a monsoon. The joke around the base is that ATC actually stands for allergic to combat. But those bomber jockeys have never tried to nurse 40,000 pounds of airplane through a Himalayan ice storm. At least when a fighter pilot gets in trouble, he can punch out. Your ejection seat is called prayer. The radio crackles with position reports from other flights. Blue 3 encountering severe icing at Angels 20. Angels 20,000 feet, right where you're headed. You glance at the outside air temperature gauge, already below freezing, and you're only at 15,000. Ice is the silent killer up here. It builds on your wings faster than a crooked poker dealer, adding weight and destroying lift. The de-icing boots on your wings are about as effective as bringing a fly swatter to a gunfight. One pilot described flying the Hump as hours of boredom punctuated by moments of stark terror. But he must have been flying a different route, because your moments of calm are what's punctuated. Your cargo today includes a dozen drums of aviation fuel, because apparently someone hates you, medical supplies, and, this is the part that would be funny if it weren't so insane, a disassembled Jeep. Yes, you're flying a Jeep over the Himalayas, in the belly of your aircraft, carefully strapped down, are also mailbags full of letters from home. Those always make it harder somehow, knowing you're carrying some GI's last words to his sweetheart in Toledo. Words that might end up scattered across a glacier if your number comes up today. The brass prioritizes ammunition and fuel, but pilots know the mail matters more. A man can fight without bullets longer than he can fight without hope. The turbulence hits like a sledgehammer. One moment you're climbing steadily, the next you're dropping like an elevator with a snapped cable. Your stomach relocates somewhere around your throat as the altimeter unwinds. 500 feet gone in a heartbeat. 1,000. The cargo shifts behind you with an ominous metallic groan. Murphy's half-smoked Lucky Strike flies past your ear as he grabs for something, anything, to hold on to. You fight the controls, engine screaming, trying to arrest the descent before you become another aluminum monument on the mountainside. This is what the Hump does. It takes your nice, orderly flight plan and feeds it into a meat grinder. The manual says to maintain positive control at all times. The manual was written by someone who's never felt a Himalayan downdraft try to slam them into granite at terminal velocity. The downdraft finally spits you out at 12,000 feet, 3,000 feet lower than where it grabbed you. Your arms ache from fighting the controls, and Murphy's face has taken on an interesting green tinge that clashes with his Texas tan. But you're alive, And that's more than you can say for the crew of that B-24 Liberator you can see crumpled against the valley wall to your starboard side. Fresh wreck, too. You can still see scorch marks on the rocks. The weather up here doesn't just want to kill you. It wants to make an example of you. You're entering what the meteorologists call a weather factory. Though calling these PhD boys meteorologists is generous when their forecasts are about as accurate as a carnival fortune teller. The Himalayas create their own weather systems, violent and unpredictable. Warm, moist air from the Bay of Bengal slams into these peaks and goes absolutely berserk. In the span of 5 minutes, you can go from clear skies to being inside a cloud so thick you can't see your own wingtips. The temperature drops 40 degrees between valleys and peaks. Ice forms faster than you can chip it off. And the winds, Christ, the winds up here have their own zip codes. Your weather briefing this morning consisted of a hungover meteorologist shrugging and saying, "Probably some clouds over the second ridge." You're now in what can only be described as aerial combat with the atmosphere itself. The wind shear hits you like an invisible fist, shoving your plane sideways. 200-mile-per-hour jet streams slam into mountain peaks and ricochet in every direction. You watch your airspeed indicator dance between stall speed and never exceed like a metronome having a seizure. The manual says to maintain consistent airspeed in turbulence. The manual can kiss your increasingly bruised posterior. Lightning erupts around you, not in nice, predictable, cloud-to-ground bolts, but in a spider web of electricity that seems to emanate from the mountains themselves. St. Elmo's fire dances along your props and wingtips, an eerie blue glow that would be beautiful if it weren't a reminder that you're flying a metal tube through an electrical storm. Your radio goes dead. Nothing but static, and what sounds like the mountains laughing at you. The magnetic compass spins uselessly, confused by the mineral deposits in the peaks below. You're navigating by memory and dead reckoning now, which is military speak for educated guessing. A wall of cumulonimbus builds ahead, its top disappearing into the stratosphere. Going around isn't an option. You don't have the fuel. Going over isn't possible. Your service ceiling is a joke compared to these monsters. So you do what Hump pilots do. You point the nose at what looks like the least violent part of the cloud and hope for the best. The turbulence inside is like being strapped to a paint mixer. Your gyroscopic instruments tumble and become useless. Without an artificial horizon, you can't tell if you're climbing, diving, or inverted. Spatial disorientation sets in fast up here. More than one pilot has flown straight into a mountain while convinced he was climbing. The hail starts as you punch through 18,000 feet. Not the grocery store ice cube variety, but chunks the size of golf balls that sound like machine gun fire against your aluminum skin. A particularly vicious piece spiderwebs your side window. The engine cowlings are taking a beating, and you're worried about the props. Lose a blade up here, and the imbalance will shake your plane apart before you can feather it. Murphy's given up trying to call out altitudes and is now reciting what sounds like a prayer mixed with some remarkably creative profanity. You join him, but you're too busy trying to keep the wings level, or what you hope is level. In this murk, up and down are negotiable concepts. Then, as suddenly as it began, you burst out of the cloud into brilliant sunshine. The peaks of the Himalayas stretch out before you, impossibly white and serene, like they hadn't just tried to murder you. Your altimeter reads 21,000 feet. The engines are gasping in the thin air, barely producing enough power to maintain altitude. Ice covers every surface, turning your plane into a flying glacier. But you're through the worst of it. For now. Historians still argue whether the weather or the mountains killed more pilots. But that's like asking whether you'd rather drown or burn. Dead is dead. You've got 3 more ridgelines to cross before you reach the descent point into Kunming. Murphy lights another cigarette with hands that won't quite stop shaking and grins at you. Well, he says, that was moderate. Your C-46 Commando, the flying coffin, as the bitter pilots call it, shudders and groans around you like it's held together by baling wire and false hope, which, considering the maintenance schedule, might not be far from the truth. This particular bird rolled off the Curtiss-Wright assembly line designed to haul peacetime cargo between cities with actual runways and civilized weather. Nobody asked its opinion about flying through the Himalayas with twice its recommended load. The engines. Pratt & Whitney R2800s that sound impressive, until you realize they're breathing air thinner than a politician's promise, are already showing signs of strain. You're flying a fundamentally flawed aircraft for this mission. The C-46 has a fatal flaw that Curtiss-Wright swears they've fixed but hasn't. The fuel system. Hit the wrong bit of turbulence. Pull the wrong maneuver too hard. And the fuel lines develop air bubbles. Air bubbles lead to engine failure. Engine failure over the Himalayas leads to you becoming a permanent resident. The newer models supposedly have improved fuel pumps. But supposedly isn't a word that inspires confidence at 21,000 feet. Your crew chief back in Assam, the kid from Ohio, spent all night babying these engines, adjusting carburetors that weren't designed for this altitude. She'll hold together, he promised. Kid's an optimist. The instrument panel in front of you looks like something from a museum compared to what the bomber boys get. Your artificial horizon is already showing signs of precession, drifting slowly to the right. The radio compass points vaguely toward Kunming, when it works at all. Your altitude is a best guess because the altimeter wasn't calibrated for these pressure variations. The de-icing system is a joke. Rubber boots on the wings that inflate and supposedly crack the ice off. In reality, they just give the ice something to grip onto better. One pilot described flying the C-46 over the hump as like trying to thread a needle while riding a bucking bronco in an earthquake. He was being generous. The C-47 Skytrain pilots don't have it much better. Sure, the Goonie bird is more reliable, but it's also slower and can't carry as much. When you're trying to supply an entire army over mountains, payload matters, so they cram us into these C-46s with their wider fuselages and bigger engines, and hope for the best. The joke is that C-46 stands for Crash 46, or Curtiss Calamity. Nobody's laughing at 21,000 feet when the port engine starts making that distinctive coughing sound that means it's not getting enough oxygen, or fuel, or both. You reach for the mixture control, enriching it slightly, praying you don't flood it. Murphy's watching the engine gauges like they're about to reveal the meaning of life. Cylinder head temperatures climbing on number 2, he reports. Of course it is. The cooling systems weren't designed for this thin air either. You reduce power slightly, trading altitude for engine longevity. It's always a trade-off up here. Go too high and the engines overheat or quit. Stay too low and the mountains win. The sweet spot is narrow and constantly moving. The manifold pressure gauge flickers, and you feel the subtle vibration that means you're right on the edge of detonation. These engines can take a beating, but they have limits, and you're exploring all of them. Behind you, 4 tons of cargo shifts with every bump and shudder. The loading manual specifies exact weight distributions, center of gravity calculations, tie-down procedures. The reality is you stuff everything in and pray it doesn't shift too much. That Jeep strapped in the belly. If those chains let go in turbulence, It becomes a 4,000-pound wrecking ball inside your fuselage. The fuel drums are worse. One develops a leak, and you're flying a bomb. You've heard stories of crews landing in Kunming with their cargo bays awash in aviation fuel. One spark away from glory. The smart money says to refuse those loads. But refusing loads means someone else flies them. And there's already a shortage of pilots who haven't been killed yet. Your windscreen is frosting over despite the cabin heater running full blast. Ice crystals form fractals on the inside of the glass, beautiful and deadly. You scrape a small clear spot with your fingernail, just enough to see the next ridgeline approaching. The controls feel mushy, sluggish, ice accumulation on the control surfaces. The ailerons are the first to go, then the elevators. Pretty soon you're flying by throttle and prayer alone. The stall warning horn chirps intermittently, confused by the ice-altered airflow. You're carrying at least an extra ton of ice, probably more. The C-46 wasn't exactly sprightly when empty, loaded and iced up. It flies like a brick with aspirations. But it's your brick, and you've grown oddly fond of it. Stockholm Syndrome. Murphy calls it. You call it Tuesday. Your vision starts to blur at the edges, and that's when you realize you've been forgetting to breathe properly. The oxygen system in this crate is about as reliable as a chocolate teapot. Rubber hoses that crack in the cold. Regulators that freeze shut. Masks that don't quite seal. You're supposed to go on oxygen above 10,000 feet, but half the time the system doesn't work, and the other half there isn't enough to go around. So you ration it, taking hits like it's expensive bourbon, trying to stay just conscious enough to fly. Murphy's lips have a distinctly blue tinge that doesn't look healthy. You tap your own mask, reminding him to breathe, but he just waves you off. Tough guy. They're always tough guys until they pass out and you have to fly solo. The hypoxia hits everyone differently. Some pilots get giddy, laughing at nothing while their brain cells die. Others turn mean, picking fights with their crew over imagined slights. You get the hallucinations. Started about 3 months into your tour, geometric patterns dancing in your peripheral vision, shadow figures sitting on the wings. Last week, you could have sworn you saw your dead grandmother in the co-pilot seat, which was awkward since Murphy was still sitting there. The flight surgeons say it's normal. The flight surgeons also stay safely on the ground, so their definition of normal is suspect. 22,000 feet now, approaching your service ceiling. Your thoughts move like molasses in January. Simple math becomes impossible. You stare at the fuel gauges for a full minute, trying to remember how to calculate remaining flight time. The numbers swim and refuse to hold still. This is your brain on thin air. Every neuron firing at half speed. Every decision taking twice as long as it should. You've watched experienced pilots make rookie mistakes up here, forgetting to lower landing gear, mixing up radio frequencies, flying into clouds they could easily avoid. The mountains don't kill you directly. They just wait for the hypoxia to make you stupid enough to kill yourself. Murphy's head lolls forward, then snaps back up. Classic sawtooth breathing pattern. Unconscious, gasp awake, unconscious again. You reach over and crank his oxygen flow to full. Regulations be damned. Can't have him dying on you. The paperwork is murder. He comes around slowly, blinking like he's not sure where he is. Did I ever tell you about my sister in Amarillo? He asks. Which makes no sense since he doesn't have a sister. The altitude is scrambling his brains. You'll laugh about it later, assuming there is a later. For now, you just nod and try to remember which lever controls the landing gear and which one dumps all your fuel. They're right next to each other. a design feature that's killed more than one confused pilot. The really insidious thing about hypoxia is that it makes you feel invincible right before it kills you. You get this warm, euphoric sensation, like everything's going to be just fine. Pilots call it the happy death, which is morbid but accurate. You've seen guys singing show tunes while flying straight into mountainsides. One pilot reportedly spent his last moments convinced he was back home in Iowa, describing the cornfields to his increasingly panicked crew. The survivors, and there aren't many, talk about watching themselves make fatal errors, aware but unable to stop, like passengers in their own bodies. Historians still argue whether the Japanese or the thin air killed more pilots, but the stats suggest altitude was the deadlier enemy. Your fingernails have turned a fetching shade of purple, and you can't feel your toes anymore. The cabin heater gave up the ghost an hour ago, and it's 40 below outside. Ice crystals form with each exhale, creating a personal snow globe in the cockpit. You're shivering so hard, it's affecting your ability to hold heading. Everything takes enormous effort. Checking instruments, adjusting throttles, even keeping your eyes open. This is what the hump does to you. It doesn't kill you cleanly like combat. It nibbles away at your capabilities, degrading you bit by bit until you make the mistake that ends you. You force yourself to take another hit of oxygen, the rubber taste mixing with the copper tang of blood from where the cold has cracked your lips. Murphy's more alert now, scanning the instruments with something approaching competence. "We're drifting north," he observes, which is both accurate and terrifying. North means higher peaks, unmarked on most maps because who the hell needs to chart mountains that no sane person would fly near? You correct course, fighting the wind that seems determined to push you into Tibet, somewhere below. If you crashed and somehow survived, there are villages that have never seen a white face, where your arrival would be treated as either divine intervention or dinner. The thought makes you giggle, which means the hypoxia is winning. Time for more oxygen, assuming the system holds out. Big assumption, like everything else on this route. It's hanging by a thread and prayer. A glint of sunlight on metal catches your eye. Movement at 2 o'clock high. Your heart hammers as you squint through the frosted windscreen, expecting to see the rising sun meatball of a Japanese Zero diving on you. But it's just another C-46, struggling along at altitude, leaving contrails in the thin air. You both waggle wings in greeting, the universal pilot salute that says, "Glad you're not dead yet." The Japanese fighters are out there, somewhere, but honestly, they're the least of your worries. The Zeros can't operate effectively at these altitudes. Their engines wheeze and gasp just like yours. Plus, why would they bother? The mountains are doing their killing for them. In the first months of the Hump operation, pilots lived in terror of Japanese interceptors. Guys would come back with horror stories of being jumped by fighters over the Salween River Valley, sitting ducks in their lumbering transports. But the statistics tell a different story. For every plane lost to enemy action, 15 go down from weather, mechanical failure, or what the reports euphemistically call controlled flight into terrain. That's military speak for flying into a mountain while thinking you're somewhere else. The Japanese figured out pretty quickly that patrolling these altitudes burned more fuel than it was worth. Why waste ammunition when gravity and granite do the job for free? You've been shot at exactly twice in 4 months of flying the Hump. The first time, the Zero's guns jammed after a short burst. The altitude plays hell with their mechanisms too. The second time, the pilot seemed more interested in looking at you than shooting. Probably as amazed as you were that anyone was stupid enough to be flying up here. He peeled off after a half-hearted pass, probably figuring you were already dead and just didn't know it yet. The real enemy isn't the one wearing a rising sun. It's the rising terrain that doesn't show up on your inadequate maps until it's scraping paint off your belly. The mountain you're approaching now doesn't even have a name, just a number on the chart. Peak 17,890. Almost 18,000 feet of limestone and ice that's claimed more aircraft than any Japanese squadron. The updrafts on the south face can grab you and slam you into the summit before you can react. The downdrafts on the north side will pile drive you into the valley floor. There's a narrow corridor, maybe a mile wide, where you can thread through relatively safely. Miss it, and you become another aluminum sacrifice to the mountain gods. Murphy's calling out terrain clearance. Ridgeline, 11 o'clock. Estimated clearance 400 feet. 400 feet is nothing. A good downdraft can eat that in seconds. The graveyard below tells the story better than any after-action report. You count 3 distinct crash sites on this pass alone. Tail sections and wing fragments scattered like broken toys. One looks recent. The metal still shiny. Another is half buried in snow, probably from last winter. The third is just a dark smudge on the cliff face. All that remains of someone's final approach. Each wreck represents 5 or 6 men who won't be going home, whose families will get telegrams with words like missing and presumed. The recovery teams gave up trying to retrieve bodies after the first few months. The mountains keep what they take. Your radio crackles with a distress call. Mayday, Mayday. This is Red Dog 7. Lost an engine. Losing altitude. Position approximately. The transmission cuts to static. Could be anywhere within 100 miles. Could be the next valley over or the far side of the range. Doesn't matter. There's nothing you can do except note the time and hope someone closer can help. But help is a relative term up here. Even if Red Dog 7 manages to put down in one piece, then what? The nearest rescue team is days away by ground, and that's assuming they can even find the wreck. The jungle swallows planes like a hungry mouth. You've flown over crashes from last month that have already vanished under the canopy. The irony isn't lost on you. You're part of the most sophisticated military machine in history, flying aluminum miracles powered by 18-cylinder engines, navigating by radio beacon and magnetic compass. But up here, you might as well be flying canvas and wood. The mountains reduce everything to basics: altitude, airspeed, and luck. Mostly luck. The Japanese pilots, when they do show up, almost seem like colleagues in some insane fraternity. You're all trying to survive the same impossible sky. One captured Zero pilot reportedly told his interrogators he felt sorry for the transport crews. "At least we can shoot back at what's trying to kill us," he said. "You just have to sit there and take it." Smart man. Probably survived the war, unlike the 70% of Hump pilots who didn't. The most morbid navigation aid you have is spread out below you, like a connect-the-dots puzzle drawn by Death himself. The aluminum trail. That's what pilots call the chain of wrecks that marks the route from Assam to Kunming. On a clear day like this, you can follow the glinting breadcrumbs of destroyed aircraft from ridge to ridge. It's grotesque but practical. When your radio compass goes haywire and the clouds sock in, you navigate by the dead. Follow the wrecks to China. The old-timers told you during your first week. You thought they were joking. They weren't. You're passing over what everyone calls Aluminum Valley now. A box canyon that's collected more planes than a scrapyard. The updrafts here are vicious, but the downdrafts are worse. Get caught in the washing machine of air currents, and you'll join the collection. You count 7 distinct crash sites, maybe 8. It's hard to tell where one wreck ends and another begins. Some poor bastard tried to turn around in this canyon last month, forgetting that you need at least 5 miles to turn a loaded C-46 at altitude. He's part of the landscape now, his plane scattered across a half-mile of vertical granite. The rescue team couldn't even find all the bodies. The mountains ate them. Murphy's been keeping his own tally in a notebook he thinks you don't know about. A hash mark for every wreck we pass, sorted by type and approximate age. He's up to 43 today, and we're only halfway to Kunming. There's another one, he says, pointing to a flash of metal in a ravine. This one's old. Maybe from the early days when pilots thought they could fly under the weather. Rookie mistake. The weather goes all the way to the ground here, and the ground has teeth. The wreck is barely visible. Just an aluminum skeleton wrapped around a rock spire like a grotesque Christmas ornament. The truly sick thing is that you start recognizing individual crashes. There's Johnson's plane, still wearing the nose art of a busty redhead named Memphis Belle's sister. There's the C-47 that went down carrying mail. You can see the scattered envelopes from here, love letters that never made it home. There's the one they call the Sitting Duck, a C-46 that somehow landed intact on a mountain ledge. Crew nowhere to be found. Did they bail out, try to walk, get eaten? Nobody knows. The plane sits there like a monument to bad decisions, slowly being stripped by the wind and weather. Some wrecks have stories, passed down from pilot to pilot like ghost tales. The B-24 that supposedly carried a payroll of Chinese gold certificates. Dozens of idiots have died trying to find and loot it. The C-87 that went down with a USO troop aboard, including a starlet whose name nobody's supposed to mention. The transport full of live mules that crashed on a peak the locals consider sacred. They say you can still hear the braying on quiet nights. Murphy scoffs at the supernatural stuff, but he goes quiet when we pass that particular mountain. Everyone does. The worst are the fresh ones, where you can still read the tail numbers, maybe even see bodies if you're flying low enough. Command discourages rubbernecking, but it's impossible not to look. That could be you tomorrow, a landmark for other pilots to navigate by. Hey, turn left at Thompson's wreck, then straight on past where Murphy bought it. You'll become part of the route, a cautionary tale told in ready rooms. Don't pull a Stevens, they'll say, referring to whatever fatal mistake you make. Your name will live on as a verb for a specific type of stupid. Historians still argue whether using the wreckage trail as navigation was brilliant adaptation or morbid necessity. Probably both. The official maps are useless. They show mountains as vague brown splotches with heights that are off by thousands of feet. But the aluminum trail, that's accurate, dead accurate. Each wreck marks a spot where the air is bad, where downdrafts lurk, where clouds build. It's a map written in failure, each crashed plane a waypoint marking where not to fly. Follow the bodies but don't join them. Stay high over Wilson's crater. Bank early at the twin wreck turn. Watch for turbulence where the whole squadron bought it in 43. The dead teach lessons to those still breathing. The wall of grey that's been building to the west finally swallows you whole. One moment you're flying in brilliant sunshine. The next, you're inside a washing machine filled with ice water. This is monsoon season's special gift to Hump pilots. Clouds so thick you could walk on them. Rain so heavy it sounds like gravel on your windscreen. And visibility measured in feet, not miles. Your windscreen wipers gave up immediately, overwhelmed by the deluge. You're flying by instruments now, trusting gauges that were questionable even when you could see. The turbulence inside the monsoon cloud is different from the clear air variety. It's wet, heavy, and comes with special effects. Lightning explodes so close you can smell the ozone through the drafty cockpit seals. The rain isn't falling. It's moving horizontally, driven by winds that can't decide which direction they want to kill you from. Your artificial horizon tumbles and resets, making you nauseous just watching it. The magnetic compass spins like a roulette wheel. Your radio navigation beacon fades in and out, lost in the static of a million lightning strikes. This is flying by feel, and what you feel is barely controlled panic. Murphy's trying to raise Kunming on the radio, but all he's getting is static and what sounds like Chinese opera. The rain is so loud you have to shout to be heard over it. "What's our heading?" you yell. "Fuck if I know," he yells back, which pretty much sums up instrument flying in a monsoon. The attitude indicator shows you in a 30-degree bank, but your inner ear says you're flying level. Trust the instruments. They taught you in training, but they never mention what to do when the instruments are lying, confused by the electromagnetic chaos of a Himalayan thunderstorm. You hit an air pocket and drop like a stone, 500 feet, 1,000. The altitude unwinding faster than a Wall Street broker's fortune. The rain is now coming up at you, driven by the updraft you've fallen into. It's like being inside a snow globe filled with water and shaken by an angry god. Your stomach is somewhere near your throat, and that breakfast of powdered eggs and despair is threatening to make a reappearance. Murphy's already filled one sick bag and is working on a second. The smell adds another layer of misery to an already impressive collection. The ice is building faster than you can shed it. In clear air, you can see it forming. Plan for it. Fight it. In this soup, it just appears. Suddenly, your controls are mushy. Your engines are laboring, and you're losing altitude despite full power. The de-icing boots are overwhelmed, assuming they're even working. You can hear ice breaking off the props and hitting the fuselage like machine gun fire. Each impact makes you flinch, waiting for the one that punches through something important. The cylinder head temperatures are dropping as ice blocks the cooling air intakes. Too hot earlier, too cold now. The engines are going to quit. It's just a question of which one goes first. Then you see it. A hole in the clouds. A glimpse of terrain that shouldn't be there. You're off course, way off course. That mountain sliding past your starboard wing isn't supposed to exist. At least not where you thought you were. The monsoon has pushed you 20, maybe 30 miles north. In clear weather, that's an annoyance. In clouds, surrounded by 18,000-foot peaks, it's a death sentence. You bank hard left, fighting the ice-laden controls, trying to get back on what you hope is the proper heading. The compass swings drunkenly, offering no help. You're navigating by panic and prayer now. The rain intensifies, if that's even possible. It's like flying through a waterfall. Your engines are coughing, drowning in the deluge. Carburetor ice is forming faster than the heat can clear it. You juggle mixture controls, carburetor heat, throttles, trying to keep both engines running. Lose one in this soup and you're done. The C-46 flies like a brick with both engines. On one engine. It flies like a brick without aspirations. Murphy's given up on the radio and is now calling out any terrain he can glimpse through the occasional breaks in the cloud. Ridgeline, 10 o'clock, close, very close. You bank right, hoping there's nothing in that direction either. Russian roulette at 18,000 feet. You notice it first in small things. Murphy's hands shaking so bad he can't light his cigarette. The way Patterson from 2nd Squadron started crying during briefing yesterday. How Lieutenant Collins flew his perfectly good aircraft straight into a mountainside in clear weather last week. The Hump is breaking pilots faster than the Japanese ever could. 4 months is the average before someone cracks. You're on month 5. which makes you either veteran or overdue, depending on how you count it. The flight surgeon calls it operational fatigue. The pilots call it getting humped. Either way, it means your number's coming up. Murphy's talking to his dead brother again. Started last week. Full conversations with empty air. His brother died at Guadalcanal 2 years ago, but apparently that's not stopping him from offering navigation advice from the co-pilot seat. You want to say something, but what? Everyone's seeing ghosts up here, yesterday. Captain Rodriguez landed at Kunming, convinced he'd been flying formation with an angel. The crew chiefs found hymns written in grease pencil all over his cockpit. They grounded him, shipped him home. Lucky bastard. The rest of you just keep flying with your personal demons as unofficial crew members. The breaks happen in different ways. Some pilots get careful. Too careful. Refusing to fly unless conditions are perfect, which in the Himalayas means never. Others go the opposite direction, taking insane risks, threading between peaks in zero visibility like they're trying to prove something to God. Thompson started flying lower and lower through the passes, skimming the terrain until his prop wash was kicking up snow. I like to see what I'm hitting, he explained. He saw it all right. A limestone cliff at 200 miles per hour. They found his dog tags 3 months later. The mountain kept the rest. You're developing your own quirks. Little rituals that you tell yourself aren't superstitions. You have to tap the altimeter 3 times before takeoff. Have to fly with that lucky silk scarf even though it smells like fear sweat and hydraulic fluid. Have to recite the Lord's Prayer backwards while crossing the first ridge. Something you started as a joke but now can't stop. Murphy pretends not to notice. Just like you pretend not to notice him kissing that photo of his girl before every landing. You're all going crazy, just at different speeds and in different directions. The new kids are the worst to watch. Fresh from training, full of that stateside confidence that evaporates at 15,000 feet. You can see it in their eyes after the first flight. That 1,000-yard stare that says they've just understood what they've signed up for. Private Morrison, 18 years old and baby-faced. Threw up for 3 straight hours after his first hump run. Now he flies with a rosary wrapped so tight around his hand it cuts off circulation. Another kid, can't remember his name, lasted exactly 2 flights before refusing to get back in an aircraft. They court-martialed him. But what's military prison compared to another trip over those peaks? The statistics are classified, but everyone knows them anyway. 50% casualty rate in some squadrons. Not from enemy action, from mountains, weather, and mechanical failure. But the 4th killer, the one they don't put in reports, is the mind. How do you quantify pilots who stop sleeping, who see Japanese fighters that aren't there, who forget their own names at altitude? Last month, a C-47 crew landed at a Japanese-held airfield, convinced it was Kunming. The navigator swore he'd followed the right course. His maps were perfect. His mind had simply edited out the part where that course led straight to the enemy. The Japanese, supposedly, were so stunned they forgot to shoot for 30 seconds. The flight surgeon, a major who hasn't flown anything higher than his desk, prescribes Benzedrine for alertness and phenobarbital for sleep. The pills turn you into a chemically aided yo-yo, up and down, never quite landing in normal. Half the squadron is flying on speed, the other half is trying to come down from it. Murphy's been taking co-pilot pills, Benzedrine mixed with whatever else he can scrounge. Says it makes the mountains less threatening. Sure. And it also makes him think his dead brother is giving landing instructions. But who's to say the hallucinations aren't better than reality? At least the ghosts don't judge you for being terrified. Your left engine coughs, sputters, and dies. Just like that, half your power gone, and you're still 70 miles from Kunming with mountains on all sides. The C-46 immediately wants to roll toward the dead engine, and you're fighting the controls with everything you've got. Murphy's already running through the engine restart checklist, but you both know it's pointless. When an engine quits at this altitude, it's gone. The question now is whether the remaining engine can hold altitude, and the answer is probably not. Feather number 1, you shout, and Murphy hits the feathering button. The prop blades slowly turn edge on to the airstream, reducing drag. Every second counts now. You're losing altitude, 300 feet per minute, according to the variometer. At 19,000 feet, that gives you maybe an hour before you're introducing yourself to a mountainside. The nearest emergency strip is 40 miles north, but north means higher terrain. South takes you toward Japanese-held territory. East and west are walls of granite. Forward is the only option, and forward means threading the needle through the Sansong Pass on one engine. The jungle below looks deceptively soft, like a green cushion. That's a lie. Bail out here, and you face a lottery of bad options. The trees are 200 feet tall, with canopy so thick your parachute will tangle before you're halfway down. If you somehow reach the ground intact, you're in Naga territory. The headhunting tribes have a complicated relationship with downed airmen. Sometimes they help. Sometimes they collect ears. Depends on their mood and whether you land in the territory of a tribe that's been bombed by someone who looked like you. Then there's the wildlife, tigers, leopards, and cobras, all of whom view crash survivors as meals delivered. Murphy's on the radio, broadcasting your position and situation. Mayday, Mayday, this is Army 44792. Single engine, descending through 18,000, approximately 60 miles southeast of Kunming. 4 souls on board. 4 souls. Military speak for the cargo handlers in the back, who are probably saying their own prayers right now. The radio crackles with responses from other aircraft, all too far away to help. You can hear the control tower at Kunming trying to vector you toward clearer terrain, but their maps are as outdated as yours. They're essentially giving you educated guesses about which mountains might be shorter. The good engine is overheating from the strain. Cylinder head temperature climbing toward the red line. You reduce power slightly, trading critically needed altitude for a few more minutes of engine life. It's all about the math now. Distance to safety versus altitude loss versus engine temperature versus fuel consumption. The equations dance in your head, and none of them balance in your favor. Murphy stopped talking to his dead brother and started talking to the engine instead. Come on, baby, hold together, just a few more miles. Engines don't respond to sweet talk any better than mountains do, but you don't tell him that. The Sansong Pass appears ahead, a narrow gap between peaks that stretch up into the overcast. On 2 engines, it's a challenging approach. On one engine, overloaded, it's threading a needle while wearing boxing gloves. You need to hit the pass at exactly the right angle. Too straight, and you'll stall trying to climb over the lip. Too oblique, and you'll run out of room to turn. The wind through the pass is going to be fierce, trying to slam you into either wall. Other single-engine planes have made it through, you tell yourself. Of course, others have decorated the cliff faces with their attempts. You can see wreckage in the pass, at least 2 aircraft that didn't quite make it. Their aluminum bones shine like warnings. The turbulence hits as you enter the gap, the wounded C-46 bucking and sliding in the confused air currents. The good engine is screaming, temperatures deep in the red now. Murphy's calling out clearances. 50 feet right, 100 feet below the ridge line, terrain rising. You're not flying anymore. You're barely controlled falling. The altimeter unwinds relentlessly. 17,000, 16,5. The pass walls blur past, impossibly close. A downdraft grabs you, and for a moment you're sure this is it. You're going to join the collection of wrecks below. Then the air spits you out the other side, into relatively clear air. Kunming is visible in the distance, a smudge of salvation on the horizon. Whether you can reach it is another question entirely. The cargo that keeps you flying these suicide runs would be comedy if it weren't so tragically necessary. Today's manifest, now fighting against your efforts to maintain altitude, reads like a drunk quartermaster's shopping list. 4 tons of ammunition, because the Chinese army shoots first and aims later. Medical supplies including sulfur powder and morphine, both worth more than gold in Kunming. Mail bags full of Dear John letters and unpaid bills. And then the weird stuff, a disassembled Jeep, 2 tons of radio equipment. And this is the part that makes you question reality. A crate marked banned instruments fragile, because apparently someone thinks what China needs to win the war is a trombone section. You've hauled stranger cargo. Last month it was an entire printing press, because Chiang Kai-shek needed to print money to pay soldiers who probably didn't exist. The month before, a load of bottled Coca-Cola for a general's birthday party. You've carried live chickens, they didn't survive the altitude. A disassembled P-40 fighter, ironic, considering it could have flown itself. And once, memorably, a single toilet seat marked urgent, command priority. That toilet seat bumped medical supplies off the flight. Someone, somewhere, was having a bathroom emergency that outranked saving lives. The most haunting loads are the people. Not today, thankfully, but you've carried them. Chinese soldiers heading to training, American advisors too important to travel by ground, and once, a group of refugee children whose eyes held more horror than any amount of flak. They sat silent in the cargo bay, not crying even when the turbulence got bad. Kids who've seen enough death don't waste energy on tears. You flew extra careful that day, actually managing to avoid the worst weather, landed them safely in Kunming, where they disappeared into the chaos of wartime China. You still wonder what happened to them. Probably better not to know. The Hump pilots develop complicated relationships with their cargo. The ammunition makes you nervous. One bad landing and you're a fireball. The fuel drums are worse, sloshing around back there like liquid death. But the mail bags hit different. Knowing you're carrying someone's last words home, their final "I love you" or "tell mum I'm okay," when you know damn well they're not. Murphy once spent an entire flight composing his own death letter in his head, just in case. "Dear Betty," he recited, "if you're reading this, I bought it somewhere over Burma. Tell my folks I wasn't scared." He was practicing his lie, making it sound believable. The medical supplies carry their own weight of responsibility. Every minute you're late is another soldier dying of infection, another wound going septic. The morphine you're hauling could be the difference between dying in agony and slipping away peaceful. The blood plasma strapped down behind you represents lives measured in pints. During the battles, they radio ahead with desperate shopping lists. Need 500 units plasma, 1,000 morphine syrettes, all the sulfur you can carry. You stuff the plane until it groans. Trade fuel for medical supplies. Pray the engines hold. Some pilots dump cargo to save themselves when things go bad. Others ride it down rather than deprive the field hospitals. There's no right answer at 18,000 feet. Then there's the weird psychological cargo. Historians still argue whether morale-building supplies justified the risk. But you've hauled it all, Christmas decorations in July because someone miscalculated shipping times. Thousands of pin-up posters that were supposed to boost morale but just made everyone homesick. Cases of baseball gloves for soldiers who barely had time to eat, let alone play catch. A complete Thanksgiving dinner with all the trimmings. Cranberry sauce surviving 20,000 feet only to spoil in the Kunming heat. The strangest was a single wedding dress, hand-carried by orders from on high. Some general's daughter getting married, and Daddy wanted her to have American white lace. You flew through a thunderstorm for that dress. 2 men didn't make it back that week flying ammunition. The dress arrived perfect. You're down to 14,000 feet now, still descending. The good engines starting to make expensive noises. Murphy's jettisoning cargo to save weight. Regulation says ammunition goes first. But those medical supplies are going out the door. Sorry, Doc. But sulfur powder won't save us from a mountain. Each crate that tumbles into the jungle below represents someone's critical need. But your critical need is altitude. The Jeep would help, but it's too big to push out the cargo door. You'll deliver that at least, assuming you deliver anything. The band instruments can stay too, if you're going to crash. Might as well provide the Chinese hillbillies with something to play at your funeral. Night catches you 20 miles out from Kunming, and suddenly your bad situation turns critical. The sun drops behind the western peaks like someone hit a light switch, plunging you into darkness so complete you might as well be flying inside a coal mine. No moon tonight, just stars that mock you from above, while the earth below turns into an invisible threat. Your landing lights are a joke, 2 feeble beams that penetrate maybe 50 feet into the black. Beyond that, mountains play hide and seek with your life. The instrument panel glows a sickly green from the radium dials. The only light in your coffin-shaped cockpit. You're flying on instruments now, trusting gauges that were questionable in daylight. The artificial horizon shows you level, but your inner ear insists you're in a 30-degree bank. The radio compass needle swings lazily, pointing vaguely toward Kunming when it feels like it. Murphy's trying to raise the field on radio, but the mountains block half his transmissions. When he does get through, the Chinese controller's English is about as good as your Mandarin. You make landing now, okay, yes? Sure, pal. We'll get right on that. The good engine, your only engine, is running rough. The cylinder head temperature has cooled from red hot to merely concerning. But now you're getting intermittent misses, carburetor ice probably, forming in the humid night air. You juggle the mixture and carburetor heat, playing mechanic at 12,000 feet. Every cough from the engine stops your heart. When it quits, not if, when, you'll have about 3 minutes to find somewhere flat in the dark. Good luck with that. The mountains at night don't give second chances. You know there's terrain out there, invisible peaks waiting to swat you from the sky. The charts show mountains up to 15,000 feet along your route. But charts lie. That 12,000-foot peak might have grown to 13,000 since the last survey. That valley marked safe passage might be full of clouds or updrafts or both. In daylight, you can see death coming. At night, you just fly along until you suddenly stop flying. The aluminum trail you followed earlier is invisible now, your dead predecessors offering no guidance in the dark. Murphy spots it first, a faint glow on the horizon. Kunming? He asks, hope creeping into his voice. Could be. Could also be a village, a forest fire, or wishful thinking. You adjust course slightly, chasing the light like a moth with engine trouble. The radio beacon should be stronger now, but the static is overwhelming. Mountains do strange things to radio waves at night, bending them, reflecting them, making you think you're somewhere you're not. More than one crew has followed a false beacon straight into granite. The turbulence is different at night, sneakier. You can't see the clouds building, can't spot the telltale wisps that mark wind shear. You just fly along until suddenly you're in it. The plane bucking like a mule with hemorrhoids. Without visual reference, every bump feels magnified. Are you climbing, descending? That sinking feeling in your stomach might be downdraft or might be your imagination. Murphy's gripping his seat hard enough to leave fingerprints in the aluminum. Terrain, terrain, he mutters, peering uselessly into the black. Yeah, thanks for the update. Captain Obvious. The glow resolves into actual lights. Kunming. But your celebration dies quickly. You're at 10,000 feet. Field elevation is 6,200, and there's supposed to be a ridge at 9,000 feet between you and safety. Supposed to be, in the dark. Supposed to be, might as well be, definitely is. Plus 500 feet. You need to descend to land, but descending means trusting that the charts are right, that some cosmic joker hasn't rearranged the mountains since morning. The engine coughs again. Longer this time. Decision time. You start a gradual descent, eyes glued to the altimeter. Murphy calling out readings like a morbid countdown. 9,500, 9,000, 8,500. The engine smooths out, carburetor heat doing its job. But for how long? The lights of Kunming grow brighter, individual buildings becoming visible. You can see the runway lights, 2 parallel lines of salvation. But between you and them is 5 miles of invisible terrain that might or might not want to kill you. You're flying lower than some of the surrounding peaks, trusting a corridor that exists only on paper and in the memories of pilots who've survived this approach. The night doesn't care about your war, your cargo, or your desire to see another sunrise. It just waits, patient and hungry, for you to make one wrong move. Between missions, you exist in a strange purgatory at the airbase in Assam. It's a world of bamboo barracks, oppressive humidity, and the constant background hum of mosquitoes the size of B-17s. The malaria is so bad here that taking your daily atabrine tablet is enforced at gunpoint, literally. Some colonel got tired of pilots dying from mosquito bites instead of mountains. So now there's an MP who watches you swallow your yellow pill each morning. The atabrine turns your skin jaundiced and gives you the runs. But it's better than the alternative. Probably. Your bunk is a canvas cot that smells like mildew and broken dreams. The bamboo walls don't actually stop anything. Not the rain, not the bugs, not the sounds of pilots screaming through nightmares. Last night, Lieutenant Patterson woke up swinging, convinced he was still in his cockpit fighting a fire. Took 3 guys to hold him down. The flight surgeon sedated him. But everyone knows he'll be back on the flight roster tomorrow. Can't spare pilots just because they've gone a little mad. The whole operation runs on madness anyway. Dysentery is the great equalizer here. Doesn't matter if you're a colonel or a private, everyone eventually finds themselves sprinting for the latrines at 3 a.m. The food doesn't help. Reconstituted everything swimming in grease that might be from 1942. Murphy swears he found a bolt in his beef stew yesterday. Not a small bolt either. Looked like it fell off a P-40. The cooks claim it's protein. The pilots claim the cooks are trying to kill them faster than the Japanese. Both might be right. The recreation options are limited to cards, letters home, and counting who didn't come back. There's a makeshift bar called the Aluminum Club. Dark humor is the only kind that survives here. The liquor is whatever the supply sergeants can steal. mixed with medical alcohol when necessary, tastes like paint thinner, burns like redemption. You drink to forget, but all it does is make the memories sharper. Every empty chair has a story. Every new face is mentally catalogued under temporary. Mail call is either the best or worst part of the week. Letters from home arrive months late, full of news that's ancient history. Your girl writes about the spring dance at the USO, not knowing you've already survived 6 crashes and lost 20 pounds to dysentery. Your mother sends cookies that arrive as green-furred science experiments, but you read every word, sniff every mouldy cookie, because they're proof that somewhere the world still makes sense. Murphy got a Dear John letter last week, read it 3 times, then used it to start the fire for evening chow. At least she's good for something, he said, but his hands shook for 2 days after. The medical tent is a circus of tropical diseases and combat fatigue. Doc Harrison, the flight surgeon, is running on Benzedrine and bitter humor. He treats everything from jungle rot to cracked psyches with the same world-weary efficiency. Take 2 aspirin and try not to die is his standard prescription. The serious cases get shipped out, if they're lucky. The malaria ward sounds like a jazz band, everyone shaking with fever at different rhythms. The dysentery ward smells like defeat. The psych cases just stare at nothing, minds still flying through clouds that never break. You develop routines to stay sane. Every morning, check the posted roster to see if you're flying. Check it again to see who isn't on it anymore. Write a letter home full of lies about how safe and boring transport duty is. Play cards with whatever pilots are still functional. Avoid thinking about tomorrow. Some guys have good luck charms. Others have specific bunks they won't sleep in because the last 3 occupants died. You've got your own ritual. Every evening, you walk to the edge of the airfield and watch the sun set over the mountains. Those peaks that try to kill you every day are beautiful from the ground. It's a complicated relationship. The insects are winning the war. Mosquitoes, flies, and things with too many legs that science hasn't named yet. They bite through netting, crawl through screens, set up housekeeping in your boots. One pilot found a spider the size of a dinner plate in his cockpit at 15,000 feet. The spider survived the altitude better than he did, had to make an emergency landing because he couldn't stop screaming. The mechanics still call that plane Charlotte's Web. You learn to shake out everything before touching it, check your bunk for visitors, and accept that you're just a mobile buffet for the local wildlife. Between the bugs, the diseases, the food, and the mountains, it's a wonder anyone survives. Most don't, but you don't think about that. Tomorrow you'll climb back into your aluminum coffin and do it all again. Tonight, you just count the hours until the next atabrine dose and try not to dream about falling. The statistics, when you finally see them written down, are enough to make you reach for the medical alcohol. 1 transport lost for every 3 days of operation. That's not a casualty rate. It's a massacre in slow motion. Over 600 aircraft scattered across the Himalayas. More than 1,300 aircrew who won't be going home. The Hump has killed more American pilots than some entire fighter groups lost in combat. But the numbers don't capture the reality. They don't count the pilots who made it back, but left their minds at 20,000 feet. Or the ones who survive physically, but drink themselves to sleep every night. You're sitting in the briefing room, staring at the charts they finally decided to share. Peak monthly losses, 35 aircraft in one 30-day period. That's more than 1 a day. Every day. For a month. The weather doesn't take weekends off. The mountains don't observe holidays. The chart shows a steady red line trending upward, tonnage delivered to China. Below it, another line in black. Aircraft lost. The two lines chase each other across the graph like a devil's bargain. Every ton of supplies costs a calculated amount of aluminum and blood. The breakdown by cause is its own special horror. Weather, 45%. Mechanical failure, 30%. Navigation error, 15%. Enemy action, 5%. Other, 5%. Other is military speak for, we have no fucking idea. Planes that simply vanished. Swallowed by clouds and never seen again. Radio calls that cut off mid-sentence. Aircraft that took off in perfect weather, with experienced crews and just weren't there anymore. The mountains keep their secrets. Sometimes wreckage appears years later. A skeleton in a flight suit still strapped to the controls. Instruments frozen at the moment of impact. They're calling it the most dangerous sustained military operation in aviation history, not the most dangerous mission. That honor goes to single raids with 90% losses. But sustained, day after day, month after month, nothing touches the Hump. The 8th Air Force bombing Germany at least gets fighter escorts and flak maps. The Navy pilots in the Pacific can ditch next to destroyers. You get a prayer and a parachute that's useless over jungle canopy. The life insurance companies back home have started refusing to cover Hump pilots. Lloyd's of London, who'll insure anything, took one look at the statistics and laughed. Your own squadron's numbers are written on the ready room blackboard. Started with 36 crews. Currently operational, 11. Not 11 lost. 11 still flying. The others are dead, missing, hospitalized, or reassigned, which means they broke completely and got shipped home in restraints and Murphy does the math out loud. So we've got a 70% casualty rate. The operations officer corrects him. 70% so far. The worst part is how routine it's become. New crew arrives. You maybe learn their names. They're gone in 3 weeks. Replacement rate can't keep up with loss rate. They're pulling pilots from training squadrons, bomber crews, anywhere they can find warm bodies with wings. But here's the sick part. The tonnage numbers work. Despite everything, despite losing more aircraft than some entire air forces possess, the Hump is keeping China in the war. 30,000 tons this month, 50,000 projected for next. Each ton paid for in aluminum and altitude sickness, but delivered. Chiang Kai-shek's armies have ammunition. The Flying Tigers have fuel. The hospitals have medicine. The equation is simple and horrible. X number of pilots die, so Y number of Chinese soldiers can fight. The brass calls it acceptable losses. Easy to accept when you're not the one being lost. The record holders get their names on a plaque, as if that matters when you're scattered across a glacier. Most tons delivered in a month. Most round trips without mechanical failure. Longest survival streak. It's macabre scorekeeping, but it gives purpose to the madness. Captain Williams flew 87 round trips before a downdraft introduced him to a mountain. That's the record everyone's chasing. Not because they want glory, but because 87 means you developed some kind of system, some way to beat the odds. Everyone studies his routes, his weather patterns, his pre-flight rituals. Maybe if you do exactly what he did, you'll last to 88. They don't keep statistics on the other stuff. Divorces from Dear John letters. Pilots who eat their sidearms rather than face another mission. Crew chiefs who develop such severe anxiety they can't touch an aircraft without vomiting. The flight surgeon who injected himself with enough morphine to forget what the mountains looked like. Those numbers don't make it into the official reports. But you see them in the empty bunks, the shaking hands, the 1,000-yard stares in the mess hall. The Hump extracts its toll in more than just aircraft. It takes pieces of everyone who flies it, leaves them scattered across the route like invisible wreckage. You're all statistics waiting to happen. The only question is which column you'll end up in. You're on final approach to Kunming. That one struggling engine finally giving up the ghost just as the runway threshold passes beneath you. The propeller windmills uselessly as you dead-stick the C-46 onto Chinese concrete. No power, no go-around, no second chances. The wheels hit hard, bounce once, twice, and somehow you keep it straight as 40,000 pounds of airplane and cargo screeches to a stop. Murphy's already popped the escape hatch, ready to run if the bird decides to burn. But she holds together. Your faithful flying coffin delivered you one more time than you probably deserved. Standing on the tarmac, legs shaking from more than just the long flight, you watch Chinese coolies swarm over your plane like ants on sugar. They're unloading the cargo you nearly died to deliver. Ammunition that will kill Japanese soldiers, medicine that will save Chinese ones, mail that will break hearts or heal them. Was it worth it? That's not a question you're qualified to answer. You're just a trucker with wings, moving boxes from point A to point B. The fact that point B requires threading between the tallest mountains on Earth is just details. Murphy's tallying up the damage while ground crew survey the aircraft. Bullet holes. No, those are from hail. Stress cracks in the wing roots from that turbulence. Half the rivets missing from the tail section. Oil streaking the nacelle of the dead engine like black blood. She'll fly again. After maintenance performs their particular brand of miracle, another crew will climb aboard tomorrow or the next day. Trust their lives to patched aluminum and prayers. The cycle continues. It has to. The war doesn't stop for your near-death experience. You know you're different now, changed in ways that won't show up in any medical exam. The boy who climbed into a C-46 6 months ago, believing in things like justice and patriotism, is gone, replaced by someone who measures life in successful landings. You've seen too much aluminum scattered across too many mountains, counted too many empty bunks, watched too many strong men break like China dolls. The hump has carved pieces out of your soul and replaced them with scar tissue and dark humor. You'll never look at clouds the same way. Never trust clear skies. Never forget the taste of oxygen-starved fear at 20,000 feet. The other pilots understand without words. The 1,000-yard stare is your membership card to the most exclusive club nobody wants to join. Hump pilots don't talk about their feelings. What's the point? How do you explain the terrible beauty of sunrise on Himalayan peaks that are actively trying to kill you? How do you describe the intimacy of dying with your crew, then not dying, then doing it again tomorrow? How do you tell your girl back home that you've fallen in love with a mountain range that murders your friends? You don't. You just drink your medical alcohol and fly your missions and count your landings until you can't count anymore. They'll pin medals on you eventually, if you survive. Air medals, distinguished flying crosses, little bits of ribbon that supposedly equal out the equation. As if a piece of cloth can balance against Thompson's empty bunk, or the sound ice makes hitting your props. The real medal is simpler. You're still breathing. In this game, that makes you a winner. The mountains took their shot. The weather tried its best. Your own aircraft betrayed you. And yet, here you stand. Vertical and ventilating. It won't last. Nothing does on the hump. But for right now, in this moment, you've beaten the odds. Tomorrow they'll post your name on the flight roster again. You'll check weather that lies. Trust instruments that fail. Fly a machine that wants to quit. You'll thread between peaks that have eaten better pilots than you. You'll do it because it's your job, because China needs supplies, because the alternative is letting the mountains win. But mostly, you'll do it because you can't imagine doing anything else. The hump owns you now, has marked you in ways that will never fade. You're part of the aluminum trail, just still breathing. The sun sets behind the mountains, painting them red like a warning or a promise. Tomorrow you'll be up there again, dancing with death at altitude, measuring your life in hundreds of feet and gallons of fuel. Tonight, you're just another pilot who made it back. In the morning, you'll walk out to another C-46, run your hand along its riveted skin, and climb aboard for another round of Russian roulette with geography. Because that's what hump pilots do. They fly until they can't. And somewhere in the Himalayas, the mountains wait patiently for their next victim. But not today. Today, you won. The Jeep is already driving away, loaded on a truck heading for whatever forgotten battlefield needs it. The medical supplies disappear into the hospital. The mail gets sorted. Letters finding their way to lonely soldiers. Your cargo disperses into the war effort, and you're already forgotten. Just another anonymous pilot who didn't die today. That's fine. Glory is surviving. Everything else is just noise. You light one of Murphy's lucky strikes. Inhale smoke that tastes like altitude and engine oil, and start the long walk to debrief. Somewhere behind you, ground crew are already prepping another bird for tomorrow's run. The hump never sleeps. Neither do its pilots. They just close their eyes and fly through nightmares until dawn brings another chance to do it all again. As you lie in your bunk tonight, the adrenaline finally fading into exhaustion, the images replay behind your eyelids in slow motion, mountains reaching up like grasping fingers, clouds that turned into walls, that moment when the engine quit and physics became your enemy. But you made it. One more successful crossing of the world's deadliest air route. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of insects outside the bamboo walls. The tropical heat wraps around you like a wet blanket, but you're already drifting away. In your dreams, you're still flying. You're always flying now. Even on the ground, part of you remains at 20,000 feet, threading between peaks in the thin air where humans weren't meant to go. The Himalayas have claimed a piece of your soul as payment for passage. That's the deal every hump pilot makes, whether they know it or not. You trade parts of yourself for the privilege of not becoming another aluminum monument to impossibility. Tomorrow will bring another mission, another dance with death in the bright blue sky. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you've earned the right to rest, to let your guard down for a few precious hours, to pretend that flying supplies over the world's highest mountains is just another job, like delivering milk or driving a bus. The pretense won't last. It never does. But for now, it's enough. The sounds of the base fade away. Distant engines warming up for night missions. Mechanics hammering damaged birds back into flyable shape. Someone crying in their sleep, 3 bunks over. All of it blurs into white noise as exhaustion finally wins. Your last conscious thought is a prayer, not for glory or medals or even survival, just for one more landing, one more chance to cheat the mountains, one more day of being vertical in a horizontal world. Sleep takes you gently, carrying you into dreams of endless sky and patient peaks. Somewhere in those dreams, all the lost crews are still flying, eternal silhouettes against Himalayan snow. They wave as you pass, fellow travelers on an impossible route, bound together by aluminum and altitude. In dreams, at least. Everyone makes it home. Everyone gets to land one more time. The mountains are just mountains, beautiful and benign. And the hump is just a funny name for a milk run that nobody remembers as anything special.